I have been blessed to have many meaningful conversations throughout the last few years of my life, but that hasn't always been the case. The skill of great communication, or in my case, rather decent communication, is something people learn throughout many years of experience, practice, feedback, and self-reflection. For me, there's been one seminal moment that has opened my eyes to why communication doesn't always work the way we'd like it to. And that has been in the Joe Rogan interview with Elon Musk. They are on the topic of Neuralink, one of Elon's companies which is developing a brain implant to cure brain injuries. Now, Joe asks Elon how we could one day communicate with each other in a non-verbal way, like reading our minds or something similar. Check this out.
Let's say you've got some complex idea that you're trying to convey to somebody else. And how do you do that? Well, your brain spends a lot of effort compressing a complex concept into words. And there's a lot of loss, information loss that occurs when compressing a complex concept into words. And then you say those words are then interpreted, then they're decompressed by the person who is listening. And they will at best get a very incomplete understanding of what you're trying to convey. It's very difficult to convey a complex concept with precision because you've got compression, decompression. You may not even have heard all the words correctly. And so communication is difficult.
Okay, that was kind of quick. So let's deconstruct it. I think Elon was talking about the Shannon-Weaver model of communication, which is also called the mother of all models. And we just learned it in school. It's about passing an encoded message from one person to another who is decoding it and giving feedback. And it all starts with you having an idea, an emotion, a feeling, a complex concept, or something like that in your head. And you ultimately want to pass that on to another person exactly the way you perceive it. But because you cannot just pull it out of your head and plant it into the head of your partner, you have to use words. So you translate that complex concept into verbal language. But the words you use are determined by your vocabulary, the way you've been raised, your culture, your beliefs, and many more other factors. So that's the first barrier where information gets lost. The second barrier is your expression. You may articulate tole or pat, or you use words with the unright meaning. Or, especially in Swiss German, sentences you just don't properly them, Even with text messages, you can't convey your message in proper detail because it would require you to write half a book. So the way you express yourself has a high chance of losing information. Now you can talk to the other person face to face, through the telephone, via video chat, or by text message. All these channels have a high potential to lose accuracy. With text messages, the formatting may change. Special characters don't get properly displayed, and there's just not enough detail in the first place. On the telephone, you have obvious technical issues like bad signal, noise, or latency. But even face-to-face, there may be background noise or poor vocal transmission. So there is your third barrier, where information can get lost. Then your partner receives your message. When he reads it as a text, he may skip some words, jumps a line, or digresses. When he hears it, face-to-face, via telephone or video chat, he may doesn't understand every bit. Or he gets distracted by, oh, I have a new subscriber. Hit that subscribe button. And that is barrier number 4, where information can get lost. From whatever he understood, he decodes this message into his own language. See, 99.9% of the words we use, we didn't look them up in the dictionary. Instead, we picked them up by our environment. I'll give you an example. For many people, in principle, or in German grundsätzlich, means always or definitely. But when you look it up in a dictionary, it says following a general rule with the allowance for exceptions. Now let's say you and I are dating, and I've looked up this definition beforehand and you didn't. You ask me, Mike, do you cheat on your girlfriend? And I reply with, I don't, in principle. That makes a fundamental difference, doesn't it? So decoding the message we receive into our own understanding is barrier number 5, where information can get lost. Ideally, from that understanding I got, I try to reconstruct what your thinking was, and I interpret that. And again, the way I do that crucially depends on my upbringing, my social environment, and my beliefs. You may say, Mike, I hate school. But for me, that is totally normal. All my friends hate school. It's the default. But for you, that is extraordinary. And you just cannot stand school at all. But because my perspective is so different, I interpret your message totally wrong. And that is barrier number 6, where information can get lost. But that's all vocal or by text. There are a few more massively important factors when it comes to effective communication. One of them is the relationship you have with someone. You may know these YouTube videos, idea explained in 5 levels of difficulty. Whether you talk to a child or to an expert in a certain field makes a huge difference. Or let's say you talk to someone you're angry on. You may scream at them, you may be disrespectful, or you just don't have any patience whatsoever. Whereas when you talk to your significant other, you are compassionate, insightful, and lovely. So the relationship you have with someone has an enormous influence on how you communicate with that person. Another factor is nonverbal communication, namely gestures and facial expressions. Recently, I've been talking to 2 close friends about their romantic relationships, about how they deal with negative emotions, and how they approach difficult conversations. Both were having a big grin on their face, and I was totally baffled. I couldn't understand how they could talk about sensible issues with their loved ones while having a big smile on their face. Only after I asked them about their unmatching facial expression, which they said came from confusion and uncertainty, I was able to comprehend their feelings, at least to a decent extent. So nonverbal signals are another super critical dimension. And there are many other factors, like the degree of attention you devote to a conversation, your mental state, the environment, tonality, eye contact, and many others that have a significant influence on our ability to communicate. So now you know everything about Shannon's information theory and how bad humans are at communicating what's going on inside of their minds. But this knowledge is useless unless you can put it to work. So I'd like to share 2 valuable tips with you on how to communicate more effectively. One of them about listening and one of them about talking. The first one is to listen emphatically and seek first to understand, then to be understood. This is habit number 5 from the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And the YouTube channel Wisdom for Life explains this beautifully. I'll link you the video right below that like button, but check it out from him directly.
Try to understand their perspective first. Try to understand how they're feeling and why. This is called empathic listening. This is the highest level of listening, the others being ignoring, pretending to listen, selective hearing, and attentive listening. None of those are very effective, but most of us listen using one of these levels. Most people don't listen with the intent to understand. We listen with the intent to reply before the other person even finishes. So before you judge, before you take action, before you contribute, just listen. So if your wife says, "I hate my job," instead of providing advice or repeating what she said, which is a typical response, you rephrase the content and reflect the feeling and say something like, "You're not enjoying your job and you're feeling upset about it." This gets you both on the same side of the table. You're listening with the intent to understand intellectually and emotionally, and then you can move forward to repair the situation. The time to be understood is when the conversation leads to logic and advice is requested. When you go down this path, maybe she'll eventually respond with, "Should I look for another job?" This is when you can seek to be understood. This is when you can provide your advice. But if it goes back to an emotional level, then you listen again empathetically until logic is brought back. This creates an atmosphere of caring.
The second one is to show how you arrived at your conclusion. Don't cut straight to the result. Charlie from the YouTube channel Charisma on Command, which is a great channel by the way, explains this much better than I could.
But one of the things that we don't often hear is that you need to show your work emotionally. Now, when you were in grade school or even in junior high and you had a test, it was frequent that you couldn't just write the answer. You had to show how you arrived at that answer in order to get full credit. Same thing kind of holds true in relationships. And I learned this when I was about 21 years old, one of my first relationships. I dated a girl when I was studying abroad in Costa Rica. Came back to the United States of America. A week or so after I had arrived in the US, she asked me, she said, "Hey, I would like to visit you, but I also have this graduation fund. I was going to spend it on a laptop. What do you think I should do? Should I get the laptop or should I come visit you?" And I thought about it. I said, oh man, so I would really like to see her, but that's going to be 1 week of time. And I know she's been wanting this laptop for a long time. She's been saving up. That laptop could last a couple years. This is going to just be 1 week. I should probably tell her to get the laptop. But all I said to her was, "I think you should get the laptop." And I later found out that she broke down in tears and cried as soon as we stopped talking. Of course, that relationship ended for tons of reasons. Distance can be very hard, but it taught me an important lesson. If I had simply shared with her how I arrived at that idea, that might not have happened. Maybe she would have said, "You know what? I know that you're afraid of feeling guilty that I don't do this, but I really do want to see you." In fact, she was kind of just asking permission to do that, and she was gauging to see if I was interested. The high level point is, when you are in conflict, or even when you're just discussing with the person that you love and are spending a ton of time with, you need to show your emotional steps at how you arrived at the decisions that you have arrived at. It will cut through a lot of conflict. It makes things much, much easier.
Okay, so now you have watched this video about communication. But if you really want to have better conversations, you have to get out and practice them. Think of it this way. You would like to learn how to ride a unicycle, but all you did so far was watching someone else riding it. Sure, it can be helpful to look at them and see how they use their arms for balance and stuff like that, but there is no way you're going to figure out how to ride this thing without practicing it. And that's exactly the same with social skills. So try to implement these 2 tips in your life, and I'll promise you, you will experience massive change. Pause the video and think of the next time you will have an extended conversation with someone, right now. Got it? Alright. Now set an alarm on your phone 5 minutes before you meet that person with a note that says, "Listen emphatically." Or, if you think of a conversation with a loved one, show how I arrive at my conclusion. Do this 2 more times, and I will promise you, you will earn more respect, you will have more meaningful conversations, and you will develop profound relationships in your life too. Catch you guys in the next one.